I lost 23 pounds in 11 months of marriage. Not from dieting. Not from exercise. From a kind of exhaustion that settles so deep into your bones that eating feels like a chore your body simply refuses to complete. By the end of that first year, I had forgotten what it felt like to laugh without asking permission first. I had forgotten what silence sounded like when it wasn't loaded with expectation. I had forgotten who I was before I became his. And the most terrifying part? I almost didn't leave. I almost convinced myself that this hollowed-out version of me, this ghost walking through a penthouse with marble floors and designer furniture, was the woman I was always meant to become. Today I'm going to tell you exactly how I ended up there. How a fairytale proposal led to a nightmare I couldn't name. How the man everyone envied me for marrying became the man I had to escape to survive. And how I finally found the courage to choose myself when everything inside me had been trained to choose him. This isn't just a story about a bad marriage. This is a story about what happens when you give yourself away so completely that you forget you ever existed at all. I need you to understand something before I begin. I was not a weak woman. I was not foolish. I was not desperate or naive in the way people assume when they hear stories like mine. I was 24 years old, raised in a close-knit family in a small coastal town where everyone knew everyone. My parents had been married for 31 years. My father still opened doors for my mother. My mother still made his coffee every morning with exactly 2 spoons of sugar because that's how he'd always liked it. I believed in love the way I believed in gravity. As something invisible but undeniable. Something that held you steady even when the world tried to knock you off your feet. So when I met Daniel Kong, I didn't see the warning signs. Or maybe I did and I just didn't know they were warnings. Maybe I mistook them for passion. For intensity. For the kind of consuming love I'd been taught to believe every woman secretly wanted. He was 34 when we met. Founder and CEO of a tech logistics company that had made headlines for disrupting the shipping industry across Southeast Asia. He walked into every room like he was already the most important person in it, and somehow he always was. The night he proposed to me, exactly 7 months after our first date, he got down on one knee in a restaurant he'd rented out entirely for the occasion. 73 roses surrounded us, one for every day since he'd told me he loved me. I said yes before he even finished the question, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. I just didn't understand yet what saying yes to Daniel Kong would truly mean. Before I take you deep into this emotional story, my mom said I won't be able to get to 1,000 subscribers. Let's prove her wrong by subscribing. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? The first time I felt something was wrong, I pushed it down. We were 3 weeks into our marriage and I was still adjusting to everything. The massive apartment in the city, the housekeepers who came twice a week, the driver who waited for me downstairs even when I had nowhere to go. Daniel worked 16-hour days. Sometimes 18. He left before dawn and returned after dark, and when he walked through the door, I could feel the weight of his presence fill every corner of the space. That night I had tried to cook dinner for him. Something simple, pasta with garlic bread, a salad on the side. I'd set the table with candles, put on a dress he'd bought me during our honeymoon, and waited. He came home at 11:30. The pasta was cold. The candles had burned down to nothing. And I was sitting at the table still waiting, because I didn't know what else to do. "You didn't have to wait," he said, loosening his tie. His voice wasn't cruel. It wasn't angry. It was just flat. Like my waiting was a minor inconvenience he hadn't asked for. "I wanted to have dinner together," I said softly. "We haven't sat down together since. I ate at the office." He walked past me toward the bedroom. "You should eat. You're getting thin." I sat there for a long time after he left the room, and I told myself it was just stress. He was under so much pressure. He was providing for us. He was building something important. I told myself that marriage required patience. That love wasn't always candlelit dinners and soft words. That this was just an adjustment period. I told myself these things because I needed them to be true. The weeks turned into months and slowly, imperceptibly, I began to shrink. Not physically at first, though that would come later. I shrank in ways I couldn't measure. The space I took up in conversations. The volume of my voice. The weight of my opinions. Daniel had a way of making me feel like everything I said was slightly wrong. Never outright criticism, just small corrections. Tiny adjustments. You don't need to talk so much at dinner parties, he'd say on the drive home. It's better to listen. People respect women who listen. That dress makes you look heavier than you are. The black one is more flattering. Why would you order that? You know it's not good for you. Each comment alone was nothing. A pebble. A grain of sand. But they accumulated. Day after day, week after week. Until I was buried under them and couldn't understand why I felt so heavy. I stopped choosing my own clothes. I stopped ordering at restaurants. I'd just smile and say, I'll have what he's having. I stopped calling my mother as often because Daniel said I was too dependent on my family. I stopped and stopped and stopped, until there was so little of me left that I could almost see through myself when I looked in the mirror. The intimacy was where I felt it most acutely. I had entered our marriage inexperienced. Completely inexperienced. I'd been honest with Daniel about this from the beginning, and he'd said all the right things. That he would be patient. That he would be gentle. That we would learn each other slowly. But Daniel was not a man who understood the word slowly. He approached our physical relationship the same way he approached everything else. With hunger, with intensity, with an appetite that seemed impossible to satisfy. And when I couldn't match it, when my body resisted or my mind withdrew, I saw something flicker in his eyes that terrified me. Disappointment. Not anger. That I could have fought against. But disappointment, the kind that made me feel like I was failing at the most fundamental duty of being his wife. What's wrong with you? He asked once, his voice quiet in the dark. Don't you want me? I'm just tired, I whispered. It's been a long day. It's always a long day. He turned away from me. I don't know what you do all day that makes you so tired. I lay there in the darkness staring at the ceiling, feeling tears slide silently down my temples into my hair. I didn't know how to explain it to him. How the exhaustion I felt wasn't physical. How it was the exhaustion of constantly performing, constantly trying to be whoever he needed me to be in any given moment. The perfect wife. The elegant hostess. The available partner. The silent supporter. I was so tired of being everything except myself. But I didn't even know who myself was anymore. Daniel's mother, Mrs. Kong, visited on our 4-month anniversary. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue, and she looked at me the way one might look at a stain on an expensive tablecloth, with thinly veiled contempt. You've lost weight, she said, looking me up and down in the foyer. Good. Daniel likes his women slim. His women. Like I was one of many. Like I was interchangeable. It's so nice to have you visit, I managed, my voice steady despite the churning in my stomach. Can I get you some tea? I'll have the housekeeper do it. She swept past me into the living room. You should sit down. You look pale. The visit lasted 3 hours, and by the end of it I had learned several things. I learned that Daniel's first serious girlfriend had been a concert pianist who understood the demands of excellence. I learned that Mrs. Kong had hoped her son would marry someone from a more established family. I learned that she was deeply concerned about when we would be providing her with grandchildren, and that she didn't understand why, for months into the marriage, there was still no news. These things take time, I said, my cheeks burning. Time. She looked at me with genuine confusion. You're young. You're healthy. What time is there to take? Daniel said nothing. He sat in the armchair across from his mother, scrolling through his phone, occasionally nodding at whatever she said. He didn't defend me. He never defended me. There were good days. That's what made it so confusing. Some mornings Daniel would wake up tender. He would kiss my forehead before leaving for work. He would text me during the day, thinking of you or can't wait to come home to you. On those days I felt like I was finally seeing the man I had married. The man who had written me love letters during our courtship. The man who had flown across the country just to surprise me on my birthday. The man whose eyes had filled with tears when I walked down the aisle toward him. He would bring home flowers. He would take me to dinner. He would hold my hand across the table and tell me he was sorry for being so distant, that work had been overwhelming, that he would do better. And I would believe him. Every single time. Because I wanted to believe him. Because I needed those moments to survive the other ones. I know I'm not easy to live with, he said one night, his head in my lap as we sat on the couch. I know I ask too much sometimes, but it's only because I know what we could be, what we could build together. I just need you to trust me. I do trust you, I said, running my fingers through his hair. Then stop fighting me, he murmured. Stop making everything so hard. I didn't respond, but something cold settled in my chest. When had I ever fought him? When had I ever made anything hard? The first time he truly frightened me, he apologized so beautifully that I almost convinced myself it hadn't happened. We were at a company event, a gala for investors and partners, held in a ballroom dripping with crystal chandeliers and champagne towers. I was wearing a gown he had chosen for me, my hair styled by someone he had hired, my smile fixed in place like a mask. A man approached me at the bar. A colleague of Daniel's, someone I had met briefly at another event. He was friendly, harmless, making small talk about the weather and the canapes and whether I was enjoying the evening. I didn't see Daniel approach, but I felt his hand close around my arm, tight, too tight, and I heard his voice, cold and controlled. My wife needs to mingle, he said to the man. Excuse us. He steered me across the ballroom, his grip never loosening, until we were in a hallway outside the main event space. What were you doing? His voice was low, dangerous. I was just talking, I stammered. He came up to me. You were flirting. His eyes were dark. Everyone saw you. Do you have any idea how that makes me look? I wasn't flirting. The words came out louder than I intended. I was just being polite, Daniel. He asked me about the event. That's all. His hand tightened on my arm. I gasped at the pressure. Don't raise your voice at me, he said quietly. Not here. Not ever. He released me abruptly, and I stumbled back against the wall. My arm throbbed where he had gripped it. Fix your face, he said. We're going back in. I stood in that hallway trembling, for what felt like an eternity. When I finally returned to the ballroom, my smile was back in place, but something inside me had cracked. That night he apologized. He cried. He held me and told me he didn't know what had come over him, that the stress was breaking him, that I was the only good thing in his life and he couldn't bear the thought of losing me. I'll never hurt you, he promised. Never again. You're everything to me. I looked at the bruise forming on my arm, and I chose to believe him. My mother called on a Tuesday evening. Daniel was working late, or so he said. I was alone in the apartment, curled up on the couch with a cup of tea that had gone cold hours ago. Honey, my mother said, her voice careful. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Okay, I said slowly. Are you happy? The question hit me like a physical blow. I opened my mouth to say yes, of course, why wouldn't I be? But the words wouldn't come. Mom. I've been watching you, she continued. At the family dinner last month. At your father's birthday. You're not yourself, sweetheart. You're disappearing. I'm fine, I whispered. I'm just tired. Marriage is an adjustment. Adjustment is learning that he leaves his socks on the floor, my mother said firmly. Adjustment is not losing 20 pounds and forgetting how to laugh. Mom, please. Is he hurting you? The question hung in the air between us. Was he? Was this hurting? It didn't look like the abuse I'd seen in movies or read about in books. He had grabbed my arm once, yes, but he had apologized. He hadn't hit me. He hadn't screamed at me. He hadn't locked me in a room or forbidden me from seeing my family. He had just reduced me. Slowly. Systematically. Until I couldn't recognize the woman who stared back at me from the mirror. He's not hitting me, I finally said. If that's what you're asking. My mother was silent for a long moment. There are more ways to hurt someone than with fists, she said quietly. I love you. I'm here. Whenever you're ready to tell me the truth. After I hung up, I sat in the dark for hours. And I began for the first time to wonder if my mother was right. It was a Thursday night when I heard them. I had gone to bed early, or pretended to, because I had learned that being asleep when Daniel came home meant avoiding the silent tension of his displeasure when I couldn't perform whatever role he needed me to play that night. But I wasn't asleep. I was lying in the dark, listening to the sounds of the apartment, when I heard his voice in the study down the hall. He was on the phone, speaking in Korean, which I didn't understand. But then he switched to English, probably because whoever he was speaking to had switched as well. No, she doesn't know anything. He laughed. A cold, dismissive sound. She's too trusting. That's what I liked about her in the beginning. Easy to mold. My blood turned to ice. The family wanted me to marry someone more suitable. But Elena was perfect for what I needed. Young, inexperienced, no complicated history to manage, and beautiful enough to show off at events. I couldn't breathe. Love. He laughed again. I don't think I'm capable of that. Never have been. But she serves her purpose. She'll give me children eventually, once I get her past whatever psychological block she has. And if she doesn't? There was a shrug in his voice. There are always alternatives. I don't know how long I lay there after he hung up. Minutes. Hours. The world had tilted on its axis, and nothing would ever be the same. I had been a means to an end, a prop, a carefully selected object designed to serve a purpose I had never known about. Everything, the courtship, the love letters, the romantic proposal, had been performance, and I had believed every single word. 3 days later I found the other evidence. I wasn't snooping. Or maybe I was. Maybe something in me had finally awakened, finally demanded proof of what I already knew in my gut. Daniel had left his laptop open on his desk. His email was on the screen, and I saw a name I didn't recognize, Unipark, in a chain of messages that went back months. Months. Before we were married. I read the emails with shaking hands, my vision blurring with tears. I miss you, one read. This marriage is temporary. You know that. Once I have what I need from it, the image, the stability, the children, we can be together properly. Just be patient. There were others. Worse. Details I won't share here because some wounds are too personal, too intimate, to expose completely. But I read enough to understand. I had never been a wife to Daniel Kong. I had been a placeholder. A womb. A respectable facade to present to his board members and family, while he maintained the relationship he actually wanted on the side. I sat on the floor of his study and I cried. Not pretty silent tears. I sobbed. I wailed. I curled into myself and made sounds that didn't feel human, because the pain was too enormous to contain. Everything I had given him, my body, my trust, my identity, my future, had been handed to a man who viewed me as nothing more than a strategic acquisition. I had erased myself for someone who had never seen me as a person at all. When Daniel came home that night, I was waiting for him. I had packed one suitcase. Just the essentials. Nothing he had bought me, nothing that carried the weight of his money or his control. I was sitting at the kitchen table, my hands folded in front of me, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. He walked in, loosening his tie, and stopped when he saw me. What's this? His voice was calm, but his eyes flickered to the suitcase by the door. I'm leaving, I said. And I was shocked to hear how steady my voice sounded. I read your emails. I heard your phone call the other night. Something shifted in his face. Calculation. Elena. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't try to explain. Don't apologize. Don't tell me I misunderstood or I'm being emotional or any of the things you usually say to make me doubt myself. I know the truth now. He was quiet for a moment. Then he sighed, leaning against the counter. Fine, he said. You know. What do you want? Money. I'll give you a generous settlement, but you'll sign an NDA. This doesn't get out. I stared at him. Even now, even in this moment, he was negotiating. I don't want your money, I said quietly. I want my life back. I want to remember who I was before I met you. I want to sleep through the night without wondering if I've done something to disappoint you. I want to eat without asking permission and speak without being corrected and exist without having to make myself smaller and smaller until there's nothing left. His jaw tightened. You're being dramatic. No. I stood up. I'm being honest. Maybe for the first time since I married you. I walked toward the door, my hand closing around the suitcase handle. If you leave, he said, his voice cold now, you leave with nothing. No money. No connections. I'll make sure no one in this city will hire you or help you. You'll be no one. I turned to look at him one last time. I was already no one, I said. You made sure of that. At least now I can be no one on my own terms. And I walked out the door. The months that followed were the hardest of my life. I moved back in with my parents, into my childhood bedroom with the peeling flower wallpaper, and the twin bed I had slept in as a girl. I was broke. I was broken. I spent the first 2 weeks doing nothing but sleeping and crying, and trying to remember how to exist without someone else dictating the terms of my existence. My mother fed me soup and sat with me while I sobbed. My father took me for walks on the beach and told me stories about his own failures, his own dark times, the moments in his life when he thought he would never recover. "But you do," he said one evening as the sun set over the water. "You always do. Not because you forget, but because you learn that you're stronger than the thing that broke you." Slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild. I found a job at a local bookstore, minimum wage, nothing glamorous. But every morning I woke up and chose what to wear without consulting anyone. I ate breakfast when I was hungry. I laughed at stupid jokes with my coworkers. I called my mother whenever I wanted. I started seeing a therapist who specialized in emotional abuse. She helped me understand that what I had experienced had a name. That the constant criticism, the isolation, the erosion of self, these were patterns, strategies, methods of control that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with power. "You didn't fail at your marriage," she told me during one of our sessions. "Your marriage was designed to fail you. You were set up to lose from the beginning. The miracle is that you survived." It took me 2 years to feel like myself again. Not the self I was before Daniel. I can never go back to her. She was innocent in a way I can no longer be. She believed in fairy tales without knowing that sometimes the prince is the dragon in disguise. But I became something new. Something harder but also more honest. Someone who understood her own value not because a man had told her what it was, but because she had excavated it from the ruins of everything she had lost. I started writing. Journaling at first, then essays. I shared my story anonymously on online forums, and I was overwhelmed by the responses. Thousands of women who recognized themselves in my words. Who had been reduced and controlled and convinced that they were the problem. We weren't the problem. We never were. I'm 31 now. 7 years have passed since I walked out of that apartment with one suitcase and no plan. I live in a small cottage by the sea, about 20 minutes from my parents. I write for a living, articles about healing, about recognizing toxic patterns, about the long and winding road back to yourself after you've been lost. I'm not married. I'm not sure if I ever will be again, but I've learned that a life without partnership is not a life without love. I have the love of my family, the love of friends who have become family, and finally, after everything, I have the love of myself. That last one was the hardest to reclaim, but it was also the most important. Some nights I still dream about the apartment, the marble floors, the silence that was never really silent, the weight of expectation pressing down on my chest until I couldn't breathe. I wake up gasping, and for a moment I'm back there, small and afraid and desperate to be enough for a man who was designed to never be satisfied. But then I remember where I am. I hear the ocean outside my window. I feel the familiar comfort of my own space, decorated how I want, filled with books and plants and the mess of my own making. And I breathe. I breathe, and I remember that I got out. I remember that survival is sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do. I remember that I am no one's acquisition, no one's project, no one's property. I am my own. And that is more than enough. If this story touched you, if any part of it felt familiar, I want you to know something. It is never too late to leave. It is never too late to choose yourself. Even if you've lost years. Even if you don't know who you are anymore. Even if everyone around you thinks you have the perfect life. You deserve to be loved without conditions. You deserve to take up space without apology. You deserve to exist as a full human being, not a shadow of someone else's expectations. If you're watching this and you needed to hear it, I see you. I believe you. And I know you're stronger than you think. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. Share it with someone who might need to hear it. And leave a comment telling me your story, or just telling me you're out there listening. We heal together. We rise together. And we never ever go back. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.